Abby, you've something has happened to you that's never happened to you before in your life. This is the first time you're experiencing it. You broke a bone in your body.
I broke a bone. I broke a bone.
Con-
And I've
Congratulations
never,
for making it this far in life without having broken anything. Because I would have sworn of all the people that work with us, you would have been like, yeah, I've broken like 17 bones. But this,
I actually realized I did break another bone one time. I did, but this time, I broke my wrist. I stupidly broke my wrist. I was walking, I didn't do anything exciting. I was walking up the stairs at my kid's school and I fell. I don't know how I fell. I actually want to kind of go back and find out uh, and retrace my steps and see if there's something weird about the handrail or something I was doing. But I was probably multitasking. I was probably on my phone. I was probably sending out an email or reading a
Abby, this
document
isn't going to
and
be good for
walking up
your
the
case
stairs.
against the school. So let's just say there was negligence at the stairs. I can't believe how damaged they were and go from there.
It was crazy. And it was amazing because I felt like all of a sudden where I fell and I was like super embarrassed. So I just grabbed all my stuff and I was like in the middle of all these like middle schoolers. And I was like, no, it's cool. It's cool. And I'm totally fine. And I leave the school and I was walking outside and I felt fine, but I was like, yeah, my wrist kind of hurts. And then later that night, I was like, my wrist really kind of hurts. And then the next morning at 6 a.m., I was like, I think I broke my wrist. I couldn't do, well, part of it was I was at dinner the night before that night and I was with a girlfriend and we were talking about stuff and I realized I couldn't cut my food. That's when I realized I think I broke my wrist. And I was like, I've never had that happen before where I couldn't use a knife. So it was really crazy because then I luckily I knew an orthopedic doctor here and I called him and said, is there any way I can come in first thing in the morning? Because I feel like I feel like somebody needs to check me out. And luckily I was able to get in, took x-rays. They were like, does it hurt right here when I press right here? And I was like, not really. He's like, what about right here? And I was like, yes. he's, like, he's like, yeah, your wrist, you broke your wrist. So they put me in this cast. It's a great thing. You can take it off when you shower,
So it's
and
not. So
that's
is
about
that
it.
like the new thing? First off, it'd be great if the test was he puts like a plate of food in front of you. He's like, cut this, and you watch it, and you can't. So when you put the cast on, do they not do like the plastery old timey casts anymore, or is it just that now?
I think they do, but I think for this particular, I don't know.
Wrists.
I actually didn't. I just wanted to get out of there. I was like, okay, just tell me what to do. When can I play tennis? How soon can I play tennis? And that was it. He was like, yeah, here's the thing. I don't know how soon you're going to play tennis, but we'll try to do. We'll do the best we can. But I think they put this on you. So I mean, I guess so that you can shower and maybe move it a bit more than when you're in a hard
Those
cast.
are,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
those are great. My mom actually, 2 years ago now, I want to say it was like 2020. She was putting up Halloween decorations. A week before, she had gone to the doctor and found out she had osteoporosis. Um, and then she was putting up Halloween decorations for Halloween party because the woman loves Halloween. And she fell on like concrete and just like absolutely wrecked her arm, like shattered this part, like wrist was like in pieces. And they just were like, we're just going to keep it in a sling until we could do surgery. And then they're like, after the surgery, she had just like the soft cast and the sling. So I guess they're sort of moving away from that, but it's convenient to not have to like,
Maybe they could check it because once the cast
they
goes
can check
on,
it
they have to like
easier.
cut it off. And
Yeah.
the thing, and also the way you hurt yourself, like don't feel embarrassed or ashamed because the thing is, this is how everyone breaks stuff. Like at any moment, all of us are like inches away from falling off a ladder, like being like, I don't want to get the ladder out. I'm going to stand on this rolling chair to fix something, or this table seems sturdy enough, and everything will break. So the only thing is, are you lucky enough that when you fall, you could stand up again? Or are you going to have to deal with that damage? So I feel like most people that have broken bones, Abby, they might not be like you and say it's broken. They'll say, oh, it hurts and I'm going to let it sit. It will heal. And then a while later, it'll be bothering them. And a doctor will say, yeah, you broke it. It healed wrong. We have to re-break it and go through a whole surgery. So you were right to really get it checked out and to know that it was broken.
And I feel lucky that I was able to call somebody super quickly. And it's an old family friend who happens to be an orthopedic surgeon. But I'm in a new city. I don't know who to call. And I luckily was able to get seen immediately. But what was kind of crazy was when I first went to the doctor, it wasn't even in that much pain. And I wasn't that worried about it. And when I came home, I was fine. And I was even, on meetings and slacking and texting and whatever and emailing. But then the next day and for 2 or 3 days after that, I was in excruciating pain. Like I think I told you, Gene, I didn't know the meaning of the word agony until I broke my wrist. I've never had, it was more pain than having kids. It was more pain than, I had 2 C-sections. It was way more painful than that. I don't know why. I don't know what was going on, but you can't sleep at night. You're like constantly, I couldn't even press the button on the side of my Apple Watch. Like that was, so.
And you've been through, and so everyone knows, Abby's not like a person who hasn't dealt with pain. I mean, over the years, you've dealt with a lot of pain. So for Abby to say this, Abby's not one of these people that's like, oh, I cut my finger. It's like one time you couldn't walk for like days. Like, I know you had knee and you had hip and you had all these problems. And for you to say that and you've given birth twice. So for you to say that this was agony, it shows because you remember those moments that are like, okay, I thought I knew pain before, but something about this broken wrist was in a spot where it's probably hitting nerves and everything. So it really affected you.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't even, it was kind of crazy. And it was over a weekend that things started to get bad. And I knew I was going to New York for a work trip. And it was so bad that I realized I needed to call the doctor again. Called the doctor again. And of course, it's a weekend and they don't answer. And I finally reached some on-call guy. And he was like, yeah, you probably should go to the emergency room. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. So we came up with a plan for trying to take, like, I guess I wasn't taking enough medication, or I needed to take more Advil or whatever it was. I don't like taking a lot of medication. So I was probably under medicating. Yeah. But you know what I think cured everything or made it all start to get better? And seriously, I'm not so into this kind of stuff, but CBD cream. I put this Arnica CBD cream on my wrist, and I swear that's made all the difference.
And they happen to be a sponsor. CBD Arnica heals broken wrists immediately. I think that's great. I thought your solution was going to be like, so I decided to have another child just to take the pain off my wrist into another part of my body. I think that is whatever you find, usually 2 or 3 days after, it's like most things, like you hurt yourself, they'll be like, look, your body is kind of like in shock now, and it's going to give you a break for like a day or two. But once that pain kicks in, you're going to realize, wow, this hurts, especially where you break it. And a lot of times people think a break has to be this compound fracture where it's like poking through and really gruesome for it to be extremely painful, or it depends where you do it on your body. A lot of times if you break a toe, there's nothing you do when you break a toe. They don't fix them. They don't like set them. They just have to heal, and they hurt because you have to walk. Anytime you put any pressure, it'll hurt like crazy. People that have spine issues, I mean, the smallest things hits a nerve, and they're just screaming in pain. So making sure you check it out and not letting it go too far is the rule. Like if you felt it that night, you knew something was wrong. Sometimes putting it off, if it feels worse as time goes on after a day or two, like definitely get it checked out to prevent future problems where someone's like, yeah, my knee's bad forever because I never got it checked out. But when you did this, so what did you learn? How was it different than like when you break a bone as opposed to other medical stuff you've gone through? Did you have to like have certain blood tests? Did you have to go through any procedures? Was there anything different than you've dealt with before?
Not I mean, for this one, it was really, they took x-rays and I guess the x-ray showed that there was a broken bone or a piece of a bone that was missing or removed or something. And it was pretty quick. I mean, it was actually one of the easier things, I guess, with a broken bone. If it's easy to, if they can actually see it, it's pretty easy to diagnose. And I don't break bones often, so I don't.
That we know of.
When I go in for a broken bone.
But now,
so
one after the
to
other.
me, it was like super easy, kind of in and out. I guess the thing that a couple things that I've thought about since were, number one, it was I was really, really fortunate that I had someone to call in the first place, especially if you're in a new city and you're still amassing all of the different doctors and, various healthcare providers. It's just really good to know who you might want to call in the event that something happens, because ideally you can call somebody and not have to go to the emergency room. But the other piece is that then figuring out what works, right? Like I was kind of joking about I'm not joking. The CBD cream really did
our
work.
Sponsor.
But all our sponsor, the CBD article cream. Ramon.
CBDA.
Sponsor us, big CBD.
Yeah. But also kind of remembering what works and what doesn't to take away pain. And like, it might be for somebody, instead of taking 2 Advil, you should take 3 Advil, or whatever your sort of like concoction that you put together when you're taking over the counter, pain relievers, just kind of figuring out what that is and maybe remembering it. Cause I know for myself, I realized, Jean, when you said when I said I'd never broken a bone, I actually did break a bone like 10 years ago. I broke my ankle in Jamaica when I was playing tennis. I fell back hitting a ball. And I'm sure, it was a total disaster having to break a bone on, out of the country and having to get back on crutches and all of that. But I actually don't even remember much about it. I don't remember being in pain. So I guess maybe I wasn't, but,
or maybe it was broken. Maybe it was a bad, the sprain. It didn't hit you in the spot that really hurts. That's why people can break things and not realize it.
You know what else is really helpful when you've broken your wrist is to not have to use your wallet for all of the important identification cards, because I couldn't use my hand. So I literally couldn't get the cards out of my wallet. And that was also super embarrassing. So having information online in one accessible place is really cool, because if you can't use your hand, or if you're fumbling around, or if you're really busy, or if you're multitasking, being able to access important information to be able to tell the doctors and nurses is also really, really good.
And usually when people break a bone, usually the severity is, okay, a lot of people, they break something, they know it's broken, they go right to an emergency room, because really you don't want to put that off. If you hear a crack, get to an emergency room. And then there's the secondary ones, which is like, did I break my finger? Did I break this? Did I, where you're not sure, but it's just not healing right or feeling wrong. And that's why wrists seem that way. Especially if you're not sure. A lot of times if you chip a bone, that could happen and people might not realize, or fracture a little something, because it doesn't have to be a clean break. It's good because x-rays actually come back. Because how many times have you gotten x-rays and they're like, we can't see anything, we have to do a sonogram or whatever. We can't see anything, we have to do an MRI. And you're like, okay, you're just like pushing me up the test ladder, and each one gets more and more uncomfortable, and you might not even get results from that. So that's the good thing. It's a satisfying thing for doctors to be able to say, hey, look, you could even look at it and it's all smashed up.
Yeah.
But I'd say that as people are treating that and making sure that they have all the data together, that helps, because you had a doctor, and that's a smart thing, because you could have gone to an emergency room and you could have, the cost does get insane. I mean, that's the thing. You go to an emergency room, and if it's not an emergency, let's say you just sprained it. They could say, you could have a whole fight with the health insurance company. Well, they'll say, well, you didn't need to go to an emergency room. You could have gone to urgent care for like $50 and gotten a little ACE bandage. And that's where people have to consider, when you do go for certain types of care, will you get the care you need? And will it be insanely expensive to treat something that you could have done. And I think that's why people also don't go. They're like, yeah, my ankle's been hurting for a month, but I don't want to go because for all I know, it'll cost me $5,000 just to find out that it's sprained and I shouldn't have gone in the first place. So finding a specialist and taking that time, sadly, just for cost reasons, is good, unless, again, it's an emergency and you're sure something's wrong.
Well, so you know what's even better than breaking your wrist?
What is that?
Having your two little kids get diagnosed with COVID the next day. So we've been in like a little bit of a healthcare bonanza over the past like 2 weeks. And one of my kids ended up getting actually kind of sick. And I don't know if we want to even go into this topic, but which we can cut. But she ended up getting 106
Whoa.
fever.
106.
106, and it was crazy. She was totally fine. And then she did a FaceTime with my mom for her birthday, and my mom called me and was like, "She doesn't look very good." And I looked at her, and I was like, "Actually, she doesn't look very good." So, and she had friends who were coming over to deliver a cake, which was so sweet of them, and she didn't even want to say hi to them, from afar. She said, "I have to get in bed. I'm so cold." And she went under her covers and she started shivering and shivering and shivering. I took her temperature and it was 104. And I called Ben and was like, "Ben, her temperature is 104. And he comes in and does it. He goes, "Well, now it's 105. And then 2 minutes later, he's like, "Now it's 106. So of course I panic and start, texting my friends saying, "What do I do?" And friends were like, "You need to go to the emergency room immediately." Other friends were like, "No, you don't. Here's what you need to do." And so we were trying to triangulate all this different information. But at that moment in time, I did not know what emergency room to go to. We're in a new place. We don't know where to go, like the ins and outs of which hospital does what and where do you get where's the best pediatric emergency room for, COVID versus something, even more serious or something, So I realized in that moment that when you move to a new city, it's really, especially if, for you, for your family, for your kids, like whoever in your household, it's really good to know where you would go in the event that something happens to you or to them. And there's different places to go for different reasons, and kind of figuring that out ahead of time, really good to do rather than when you're in panic mode. So what we ended up doing, I did all the wrong stuff. I was like, put her in a cold shower, And apparently that's not what you do anymore, but that's what we did. And it actually,
why wouldn't you do that? I mean, she's hot, throw in a bathtub full of ice. Like in the movie Jacob's Ladder, you just throw her in a bathtub and she'll cool down. But that's crazy. 106 seems like, I've heard 104. That's, I think, the worst fever I had as a kid. And it felt terrible, but
yeah, 106 is alarmingly high.
Yeah, that's like she's turning into the Human Torch.
Apparently it's not that high for kids. I guess it's high. It's high. It definitely is a high fever, but I think kids can withstand high fevers. If it were an adult, it would be a different story. But with Motrin and Tylenol, you can actually bring a fever down. And then after that high fever, we were able to keep it down, and she ended up, getting better and better and better as the days went on. But it just did occur to me that it's super important to have a plan. I know it sounds so cliche because it's what we talk about all the time, but literally I didn't have a plan. And, I've been here for 7 or 8 months now in a new city. So I really should.
Yeah.
And so now I'm starting to think about like, okay, well, where would I go for different situations? Like if I have a dental emergency, where do I go? Where would you go?
Where would I go? Well, first, when for me in emergency, like I don't like traveling, you know me, I'm not a fan of travel in any form, but when I do, I always, before I go, search and see what's the best hospital near where I'm staying. Like I'll just do that. Just because I'll say, okay, where would I want to go if something horrible happened? And, now with technology, I'll just say, okay, what's the hospital around there? Dental emergencies, I have a dentist that I use, and I'd be like, okay, when they could usually get you in, but there's also emergency ones that you could look up that are close by. Usually with dental stuff, it's rare that you have a full-on emergency. I know everyone has one time where something breaks or something's really painful. Usually they'll get you in the next day, if you have a decent dentist. But I think putting together that list of like the emergency stuff and making sure, like, if your kid has a really high fever, or if you have a really high fever, because I always wonder, like, what if you are like traveling and you're in Colorado and you're just like, if I got sick, where would I go? Would I go to the one hospital that every local's like, no, never go to that hospital. That's terrible. They'll experiment on you, and they have no equipment there. Or would you go to the one that you'd say, okay, this is where locals would want to go, and this is what they have to say. But for the most part, most hospitals, you should get a decent amount of care, at least to get you well enough to get to a better hospital if things really turn bad. I just think it's amazing that she made it through. That's great. You didn't have to break her wrist to take her mind off the fever. Like, here, I know the fever hurts, but this will hurt worse. But if your kids broke a bone now, you pretty much know what to do. Like, you'd just be like, okay, I'm seeing, hold the wrist, doing that. I think to look out for your kids, because sometimes kids are very vocal about things. Other times they hide things.
I mean, actually, so who are the people that you should at least, who are there, like the top 5 people that, or, doctors or things like this that you should make sure to have on hand? Like, who would they be?
I think it would sort of come back to, like, if you have any sort of underlying medical things. Yeah. Like, I was in the hospital a couple times in the fall. First of all, urgent care, no. I went there with, like, breathing issues. Apparently, I learned throughout this process that I have asthma. But the urgent care guy was like, yeah, we can't figure out what's wrong with you. You might have, like, a blood clot, which makes me immediately think I'm going to die. And he was like, you need to go to the emergency room. I'm like, and so I can't breathe, and I'm having a panic attack and, like, sobbing on top of it. And I'm just like, what? 0 out of 10. I don't recommend, but I recommend that people check out and talk to people about which urgent cares are best, because I will never go back to that one. Yeah. But, like, when I was, like, at the hospital, though, like, I have an ENT, and that is, like, something, that was pertaining to what I was there for. And, like, I knew his number. I, like, knew the name, knew, like, where it was, like, his hours or whatever. Like, I mean, it was, like, middle of the day, so obviously he was open. But just, like, being able to recall the doctor, even just the doctor's name, so that way they can look it up and find it really quickly and easily. Like, I was able to just sort of be like, Dr. Shaw, sponsor us. But Dr. Shaw, he's, like, in Union Square, call him.
And he loves CBD with arnica. That is, having this specialist is really good. I'd say that urgent care is when you don't want to have to wait for 5 or 6 or 7 hours in an emergency room. Like, if you're not sure, when my appendix was about to burst and I still didn't want to go to emergency room, I went to urgent care first, just to be like, okay, I don't want to go and wait all day. And I should have gone to an emergency room, but I knew that I was around there. I went through all the procedures and all that stuff, and they sent me to another place, which ended up saying, get to an emergency room right now. But it was because I've had such bad experiences with emergency rooms where I've gone there and they're like, you didn't need to come here, when I was younger. And I think making sure urgent care is like a cheap, quick option to say, hey, can you fix this? And if they're telling you you have a blood clot, or, you might have a serious condition, because they're like, look, someone cuts their arm open, we can give them a few stitches, but we're not going to be doing open heart surgery at this place. So I think for that, it's a good, like, it shouldn't panic you like it did, like they did to you. But that's usually like a quick stop, especially for people that don't have good insurance. You don't want to go to an emergency room, because it could be a couple hundred at urgent care, and everyone knows, and it'll be thousands at a hospital.
At the ER.
So
I think, but yeah, just like, not necessarily like, you should have a list of, the specialists that, like, are, like, frequented in your life. Like, I live and die by my ENT. I love him. And then, like, just talking to people, especially in a new city, about, like, where they've had good experiences at an urgent care. Like, now that I had to go to the ER, like, I went to the same one twice, and I really liked it. Like, I thought it was, like, the level of care was great. It was pretty zen. And so, like, now I'm like, I would recommend that if someone in my neighbor, like one of my friends in the neighborhood, was like, oh no, this emergency happened, where do I go? I'd be like, go to Coble Hill,
There you go.
Exactly.
Having a primary care.
I think just knowing,
yes,
your list, getting your list down of the places that are your go-tos is super important, so that you're just not scrambling around, because it's always at those moments where you're not able to think straight, you're in a total like craziness, that you're having to scramble to find. And these are important decisions to make. And can be costly, can be stressful, can be time consuming.
And you don't put it off. I mean, I think that when it comes to those types of issues, having a primary care, and again, finding new ones isn't tough, because you should ask people around where you are. So Abby, like right now, since you're new there, it's a good way to make friends. And say, like, what doctor would you see? But also make sure it's not like my parents, who would see the same crappy doctors for like 40 years because they felt beholden to them. And we're like, that person has not helped you do anything. That's the worst skin doctor. And no, we always go. And I know he sucks, but he's still someone. And I'm like, it's your health and it's a problem, and other people can fix these. So you have to be willing to let a doctor go. And if you're not comfortable in an appointment, or you don't feel, or if they make you wait every time as you show up and they're like, yeah, you have an appointment that you made in advance. Not if they see it the last minute, but if you made it like a month or two in advance and you're waiting for 15, 20, 30 minutes, walk out. Be like, you know what? I understand you see people for emergencies, but I made this 2 months ago, and I'm not going to sit here all day in a room with sick people around. So I'd say primary care. I think other ones, like I know a lot of times when I talk to women, it's like finding that gynecologist that they're really happy with, that they can go see, not only for the checkups, but if they do have something flare up and they're like, you know what, this is bothering me and I want to get it checked out, and I trust this person, because I've also, again, talked with people who have doctors they didn't trust, or someone who dismissed their symptoms. A lot of times you hear that, people that don't listen, and they'll say, oh, you're fine. People deal with pain. Yeah, that happens. And if you hear that, you're like, no, there's got to be something to fix this. And I think when it comes to like now with broken bones, it's tough, because to have a list prepared to say, what if I break a bone? What if I, have a thyroid issue? What if I have, all of a sudden I have to deal with asthma or something that you've never dealt with? You kind of have to reach out to people around you. But having that first step is really good. And making sure with your kids, if there are any specialists, a lot of times like an endocrinologist or someone that you might need to see. A lot of older people have, cardiologists. They have doctors for their arthritis. They have orthopedic surgeons. It's something you collect. I do think as you get older, you start collecting doctors. And, if you go down to places like Florida, the pastimes are talking about what they eat and their medical conditions. So that's what they do.
And their grandkids.
And their grandkids, and why their grandkids never call. Why don't they call more? Maybe it's because you always talk about your medical stuff and food.